We're the number one fastest growing state. We're the youngest state. We got the number one economy in the US. It's been that way for 8 out of the last 10 years. There's nothing small market about Utah. We have 7 million people that come in here to ski. Everyone comes in town. Our tech scene is number 2 or 3 in the US with the tech, rise. You can jump on a plane 5 minutes, 10 minutes from our arena and go straight to Amsterdam, London, France. That's not a small market.
Ryan, we are so excited for this. I mean, 3rd time of you putting up with me. Now you actually get to meet the really talented Stebbings. So thank you so much for joining us first.
How many Stebbings are there?
12. Our parents didn't stop shagging.
Are you guys from Utah?
Yes.
Are you sure you're not from Utah?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. We are. Most of my LPs are from Utah, and so I will be anything for an LP, right?
Yeah, it's good. I like it. The 12 sibling family.
Listen, I want to start with, we've chatted before. Everyone knows the incredible journey with Qualtrics. What led to the transition to owning sports teams? We've got the Utah Jazz. We've now got Real Salt Lake. How did incredibly successful tech founder become sports team owner? Let's just start there.
I have no clue. I mean, honestly, if you back up, it's I don't even know how the tech founder thing started. I didn't grow up saying, hey, I want to turn pro in enterprise software. I think that's the first part is I don't think that there's this grand plan as you graduate college and you say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I think I've been really comfortable kind of dealing with what the game would give me and then trying to make the best of every situation as opposed to saying, hey, if I would have laid out a full plan about how everything was going to go, I don't think we'd be here. And I don't think I would have been a part of such amazing rides. It was just more of looking for opportunity and saying, this is what it is. And so we've had one of the most incredible runs in tech. I mean, I think, we sold the company to SAP in 2018. We took it public in 2020 outside of the biggest software company in Europe. That's incredibly hard to do. I didn't even know it was possible. I remember calling Egon Durbin at Silver Lake in 2020. And I said, hey, you did this with Dell computers. Do you think we can do that? He's like, absolutely. What was it? 4 weeks ago, Qualtrics finished a deal actually with Silver Lake of all things. So that's kind of how the world goes. And I think it's a pre-IPO company again. So Excel just made a big investment back into Qualtrics, which is kind of crazy. And we said, hey, why'd you put a huge check into Qualtrics? He's like, well, you're pre-IPO again. You're just $1.7 billion in revenue. And it's different. So I think that the journey you can't make up. We have a principle at Qualtrics called all in. And you've heard me say that, where you just we are all in. I've been heads down for 20 years in tech and I haven't sat on boards. I really hadn't, probably until 2018, made many venture investments. It was all Qualtrics all the time. And I think that was a competitive advantage for us. It drove me nuts at times, but we did nothing else. It was family and Qualtrics. The only thing that actually got my attention and intrigued me really to a point where I couldn't stop thinking about it was basketball. I was a big hoops guy. And I had a friend, Danny Ainge, who I would go and actually play golf with during the summers and meet up. And he would tell me about the inner workings at the time. He was running the Boston Celtics. And I was like, holy cow, the more I dig in, the more fascinating it became. And there was a chance to, when we sold, everyone's like, well, what are you going to do next? And I was like, I'm going to do hoops. And I don't know how. I mean, there's a lot of people that probably say, hey, they want to get involved in the NBA. And I was looking at another team and we basically, long story short, had a chance to do the Utah Jazz. And that's a team I grew up watching. It's the team I snuck into the arena during the last dance. And I remember Adam Silver calling me and saying, hey, Ryan, look, man, if you're lucky enough to be part of the NBA, it's one thing. If you've won the lottery, you can be part of a group or, a majority owner of a team. There's 30 of those. He's like, but no one gets the team they grew up cheering for. No one.
So can I ask, Ryan, when the opportunity came about, was it a sentimental, I love hoops, I love the Utah Jazz, or was there actually, this is a good business? Was there a logical business decision, or was this a sentimental heart?
It was probably The first part, like, it was definitely sentimental. Like, we're going to do this. We're not going to blink. And then, like, after you're in that process, you're like, wait a minute, this is a big deal. It's a big purchase. I don't think it was like, especially coming from looking at a P&L of Qualtrics and looking at the growth and looking at tech versus this, it felt a little bit at the beginning like a nonprofit. Like, it wasn't the same. To be honest, there's a lot of opportunity. And I think we've kind of flipped that on its head a little bit to say, hey, actually, in order for us to play in a competitive game where we are going to be competitive long-term with the way player salaries and everything's going, we're going to have to turn it into a business.
What does that look like, that transition, turning it into a business?
Well, I think you've got to grow the pie. You've got a bunch of fixed costs in the NBA. And if you want to invest above that, which most teams who are competing, you can think about this with Premier League. Like, look at the teams that their salary or the way that they're acquiring players are at a different level. Getting the teams one thing, but investing in a way where you're investing to win, I would say, has completely changed over the last 5 to 7 years in the NBA prior than the 15 before. It's not something that was always the case. I think if you look at the last 5 to 7 years, I don't know what it is. It's like maybe 14 or 15 out of 16 teams who have been in the final 4 teams standing have been in the luxury tax where they've actually had to invest and had to play. And then as you grow these players and everything gets more successful, then you need to invest more and contracts come up and you need to be ready to do that. And I think that that's the difference of where the league's at. And in order to do that, you've got to be able to grow and kind of expand the enterprises of what the team looks like.
When you were going through it, did you have to go and speak with the league about taking it over and prove that you were actually capable of running the team as well as obviously buying it and having the resources to make the acquisition against the resources to run the franchise?
Yeah, for sure. And fortunately enough, I had been working with the league from a Qualtrics standpoint. I mean, we were running all the fan experience for a lot of the teams, and through SAP, I was sitting on like an NBA Tech Council and had gotten to know Adam. So he knows there's probably 40 people that are sitting there right by the hoop for him right now saying, hey, if a team comes up, I want to be in, and trying to get to know. That's part of the commissioner's job, is to know who's out there and kind of who would fit and who has the right mind. And, I think one of the things that he told me coming in was, hey, look, don't check everything you've learned from the tech world at the door. Actually, like, please bring that into the NBA, especially about being, at the time, we're the youngest ownership group to come in. I think that's exciting.
What are some of those key learnings that you brought across? Like, if you were trying to package it up and say, that is something I specifically learned within business that I've actually brought into sport and has worked or is working.
I think culturally you come from two different worlds. I mean, we tore down a lot of walls in tech, like from a hierarchy standpoint to flat organizational structure to the way that leaders lead. I think that some of that has been pretty applicable here. We've tried to work historically to have groups of team members together for a long time. That's something that in sports ebbs and flows. Even as a leader, you hire the best people and truly try to get out of the way. Like that's something that you see. Now there's different occasions where that happens. There's really a lot of teamwork that has to happen from a leadership standpoint. And I think that we're also not afraid to tear things down if they're not working, and we're always trying to climb. And that's just part of it. I mean, we've had to rebuild our Qualtrics system 3 different times from the ground up. And those are big decisions. We had to reposition the whole company and create a new category, experience management, from a position of strength right before going public. So I think all of that helps. Those are not to say that anyone coming in from any other industry doesn't have those same principles. I also think that as we've come in, we've kind of had to go through all of that. That's the natural process.
Can I ask you said there about kind of tearing down things and the lessons from them and being willing to turn down. When you think about Utah Jazz or Real Salt Lake, since ownership of either, what have you had to tear down that didn't work? And did you learn anything from that process?
I think in tech, a little bit, not everything's as public as it is with sports. I mean, like, I always thought, hey, people really care about enterprise software. No one cares about software compared to sports.
No one does. This is what I've learned doing these shows, Ryan. It is so much easier to grow a sports show than a fucking tech show. No one told me 10 years ago. 10 years.
It's the way it is. Like, I mean, it's religious, it's passionate, and having to come in and say, hey, look, like, what's our goal? Is our goal to be really good? Or is our goal to win a championship? And we've had to do that a lot in tech. We've had to say, okay, like, really, what are we shooting for? Are we shooting for 40% growth, 50% growth? Are we shooting for an IPO? Are we shooting for, category leadership? The difference between tech, in my mind, ultimately, and sports is, number one, you have a closed market. So we have to interact with the same players and the same teams at all times. In tech, it's like we can go recruit someone anywhere in the world at any time and pull them over. Maybe we don't have to deal with that company or firm or whoever it is ever again. So that's very different. Like if we do a trade with Minnesota, Minnesota's 129th or 130th of the NBA. We've got to be able to interact forever. And those franchises have to be able to interact, and we're partners. So it's kind of different. Second is there's no such thing as market share. In tech, we work on this world where, like, whether it's Salesforce is clearly the category king in CRM, but I don't know what the stat I saw. Maybe they have 36% market share. Like 36% market share in the NBA doesn't really do a whole lot for you, because at the end of the year, there's one winner and there's 29 other teams that aren't happy. And that's a huge shift. It's like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to ultimately go? And in Utah specifically, like, we are trying to win a championship. And I think if we were trying to make the playoffs every year, we'd probably have a little bit of a different strategy. So coming in, we truly are going to have to maybe think a little different and go all in on a couple different decisions. And I think we've done that. I mean, I came in and we were the number one regular season team, but we've been bounced out of the playoffs. And we had to make a tough decision last year, basically at the beginning of last year, is we were hosting the All-Star game in Utah, which was pretty cool. But we had 2 All-Stars, and I brought Danny Ainge in, who was part of the reason why I was part of the NBA. And we all sat down and said, hey, do we think we have what it takes to win a championship? Because we were kind of at the point where we had pushed all the chips in, and to push them further was going to probably set us back. It was kind of all or nothing. And for one reason or another, we made the decision to move on and kind of reboot a little bit, trading 2 All-Stars, which is probably not the most popular thing to do if you're taking over a team in the first couple of years. And, we have more first-round draft picks than anyone in the NBA right now. And Lauri Markkanen, who we got back from Finland, ended up starting the All-Star game in Utah, and you can't make that up. And so I think we're at a good spot. We've got a bunch of young guys. We've got kind of a bunch of seasoned guys as well, and that's a pretty unique spot, and it's kind of what we do from here on out.
So those are big decisions. Do you communicate that directly with the fans so that they understand the strategy and don't go to you, look, why are you doing this? Why are you selling our best assets? Because I feel particularly, we've seen some more of it in Europe, particularly with the private equity takeovers of football clubs, where there's clearly a strategy. You use Chelsea as a very good example with Clearlake, and something that they are clearly working towards is stripping a team and rebuilding it and growing something in the image of them rather than the previous ownership. But the communication with the public has been very limited on that. And if they came out and explained the strategy around why they're doing it, maybe it's more understandable. Do you communicate with those fans to allow them to understand and go on that journey with you?
It's a really good question, because it's really hard to communicate some of those things. Like, for example, in Chelsea's situation, when they move on from someone, I don't know that it's okay to talk about everything that's going on, because, for example, player discussions and player personnel and players' careers, there's just things you don't talk about publicly, even though you know that it would be easier to message if you could. But you never want to do anything to damage someone's career or anything. And that's just part of being a great organization and great leadership. When it comes to the player personnel side, like, that's not something that we talk about, even though sometimes it would be way more helpful to be able to communicate that. what we try to do is we try to communicate our goals. And this is what our goals are. And I think in our situation, it's like, look, we've had a franchise for 35 years. I mean, we're actually going into our 50th season. So it's been 50 years in total. We haven't won a championship. We're not going to tiptoe into a championship. We're going to have to do some moves that maybe the fans don't see at the beginning. And that's okay. Like if they believe in who we are and they believe in what we're trying to do, what I do know is they'll be happy when we have a parade and we're hanging a championship banner. And I think they know that I'm all in. I feel like with Danny and myself and Will, like if we can't do it, I don't know. We're willing to roll and really to go all in. And so I think they see that.
Does money solve all problems in sport like we thought it did in tech? Like we thought pumping 100 million into a company solved all problems. Just buy growth. Fuck it. Just buy more growth. Just buy more players, buy better players.
I think money goes a little further in sports than it necessarily does in tech. But up to a point. I mean, we've seen a lot of teams who have gone all in and are so well financial and still can't win it because there's rules. You just can't go buy whoever you want. And I think in Premier League, you have a little bit more flexibility than you do in the NBA. The rules are set up in the NBA where, you know, typically if you draft someone, you should be able to work with them. And there's caps and ranges where in like maybe baseball and football, like the sky's the limit. And so you could get into a couple situations where money is what's speaking. Winning culture, I think it's truly in basketball, it's truly team, right? It's not one individual. It's how to get the group of individuals to go and do something. I think what you're seeing in the NBA is there's enough ownership groups and owners and governors who legitimately are all in financially.
Can I ask a really personal question? How much money have you put into Utah Jazz so far?
A lot. I think it just continues.
Does your wife know the true amount?
No. You know what? You know what's crazy? This is super interesting. You know, my wife and I, like, we've been together for like 17 years and we dated for 5 years before that. And so essentially, like, she started like hanging out with this kid when we were in the basement, like doing Qualtrics. Like my early pictures of Qualtrics, like the whiteboard behind all the pictures has like her like maiden name written and then like her writing her name with my last name. Like there's like little things like that and like us going through it. But she really didn't have a role in tech. It was like my gig, my sacrifice. This is what we're doing. And she would support me. That's kind of like all she could do. And because it was a company, as we've done the Jazz, like it's Ryan and Ashley and it's our ownership group. Like it's really, really, really cool to like be able to do something. And she has to be all in. Like we just kicked off our summit with all of our employees and coaches and everything. And like I introed and she gave like a 30-minute speech to start off. And I was like, damn, like that was good. Like we're going to unleash you. Like you've got it. Like you're amazing at this. And like, I think it's the first thing that we've been able to do together. And so when it comes to investment, I think she's cool with it. Like with whatever it is. And
do you put caps on it though? Because otherwise it is just a pit that continuously needs replenishing.
We just free flow right now. I mean, we're just rolling. Like, I don't know. I think we're starting year 3.5. And, you know, we're just trying to do better. And, but I also think that like money's not what's going to drive. I mean, it's work. Like it's actually hard work. Like it's the details, the stuff that you just throw money at typically isn't what actually makes a difference. It's like actually the thought, the creativity, like how are you going to be different? Like how you're going to organizationally structure different, who you have in the building. You can pay a lot of money for people that maybe aren't it. But money, when it comes to player and personnel, they have the checkbook. Danny and Justin, like there's really no limits to what they can do. They're the ones coming to me and saying, hey, look, that might be a great idea, but I don't like that contract. There's massive restrictions in the NBA if you're constantly just spending enormous amounts. Like with the new collective bargaining agreement that just came out, like we as governors voted that, there's, 2 years past 17 million over the cap, like you lose draft picks, you lose this. And so when you flex up is really important. So they know that they can go. It's just when.
What do you think about the valuations in general, the way they've kind of gone up over the last 20 years, let's say? I mean, I think we had Steve Pagliuca on and he was talking about buying the Boston Celtics, and obviously now looking at the value of the franchise today compared to 2003 was incredible.
No, Pags is great. He's an incredible human. This is how I explain it to people is like, we've got this social like world that's going on, right? Where if you actually think about it, it's like so much of the world is curated to say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. Here's my selfie. This is what's going on. Live sports and live events are like the physical manifestation where it's like, no, I got out of the house now and this is what I'm going to do, right? And then you also have this mission-driven identity that people are chasing. And part of that is like who your team is. And I think both of those are like on a absolute heater. Like both of those are going up in a way that I don't think people probably would have thought. And you're seeing this from Taylor Swift to like Beyonce and all of the events, F1. I am bullish on live events, like flat out. Like I believe that this is something that is actually going to transcend all technology, all time. Like this is what people want to go do. Then you have the rules that leagues are starting to say, hey, people can take minority positions in these teams where historically, if you were a minority owner in a team, you were actually pretty stuck. It was like being a seed investor on a cap table, third position down. Like you couldn't really pull liquidity out, or you were kind of along for the ride. And now with sovereign wealth funds and private equity groups, I remember when the first private equity group came into the NBA, I was like, how in the world is this going to work? You're really out raising institutional capital. And we brought in Arctos because they own, I think, 16 or 18 different teams across sports. And in the beginning, I was a little bit like, okay, but then watching their rise and how valuations have gone, and as they've let some of the air out of these, what I would call minority investors in these teams, and then watching the valuations double and triple, I'm looking back going, hey, whatever endowment put money into that might be one of the better investments that I've seen, especially as tech's gone the other way and multiples have completely contracted.
Do you think now's a good time to sell? I'm just putting this out there as a contrarian thought. Maybe not popular with fans.
Not even close. Like this thing, it's not going to stop.
Respectfully, like everything goes up and down, Ryan.
The thing in tech is you have, like, for example, in tech, you've got multiples that have gone from, I mean, when we IPO'd, our multiple was like 40 times. And now we're like, I don't know what, like 6 times.
Bring back 2021.
But there's 200 or 400 or 600 or 800 tech companies. There's 30 NBA teams, period, hard stop.
Yes, but there's also 20 Premier League teams. There's also many F1 teams. There's also, burgeoning interest in like tennis, burgeoning interest in you name your sports. I'm just saying, like, actually, there's been one lesson that we've learned from the last few years is that when everyone's leaning in, lean out. And when everyone's leaning out, lean in.
I think that all of these teams are not the same. I would look at like the NFL and say, hey, wow, like why aren't many NFL teams transacting?
Why aren't they, Ryan? I'm sorry, I'm naive.
Because they are phenomenal businesses, standalone. And I think the NBA is getting to a point where it's not just the appreciation of the valuation of the team. I think that what Adam and the group and the players and everyone's coming to do is create this partnership where these can be a phenomenal business, not only for the community impact, for real estate, for everything else. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think people are starting to look down the road and say, whoa, like out of every business that you could be a part of, this kind of checks all the boxes. It impacts the people, the community. There's a media and a tech component to it. There's a real estate component to it. It kind of brings it all together. And there's really nothing you can't do with these entities. Now, we have a long way to go. I would say that there are leagues that are doing better than others, and there are leagues that have a really, really long way to go. I think MLS is one that's coming up, but I wouldn't say it's anywhere near where the NFL is right now. And I think Premier League, I think it's a great business from what I see, but I also think you've got to ask yourself, if you want to truly be competitive in Premier League, like, is it a good business? Like, there's no governor. There's no, it's like all gas, no clutch or brake when it comes to spending. And so if you're not Man City or you're not Chelsea and maybe Man U, can you actually create a decent business model when you've got sovereign wealth funds like going all in and you're competing against governments? Like that's really hard. And so
do you think this is the product though of the wider kind of US sporting environment? And like the security of franchise systems, building brands that are secure within their sports. You look at Premier League, you look at, Harry, you were talking about Formula One, you were talking about, lots of other sports. There isn't the same security that you have within the NBA, the NFL, now MLS coming up. Right? When we had Ivan Gazidis on recently, he was talking about the value of the smallest MLS team. And then you look at the value of what Bournemouth sold for in the Premier League last year, and it was 150 million in the Premier League team. But that team can get relegated. And if it gets relegated, it loses so much of its value. You have that security.
Yeah, and Premier League is not about buying the team, it seems like, right? It's about what you put on the field, which could be one player, could be as much as the entire franchise. You're not seeing that in the other sports. If your primary business is just sports, and that's what you're going into versus owning car washes or starting your own tech company or doing that, I don't know how you compare to each side. Like, however, I think the broader question is like, are you bullish on this? Yeah. If you were sitting in my chair and you were able to watch the impact, like we have a long way to go. We just did crazy media adjustments on how we're going to market on media.
Can you talk to us about that quickly? Because that's quite an interesting one.
When we took over, we had a model that was 10 years old, and so did most of the NBA, where we would basically take our media rights of the Utah Jazz and we would send them over to a third party, and then they would write us a check. And their job would be to go get distribution and pull money out of Comcast, ESP, or DirecTV, Dish, and these other local carriers. And they would recoup their money. And it was a great model, except for there was one problem. And you guys know this. I come from the experience world. We have 3.2 million people within this region here in Utah, and we were showing our games to about 1.2 million. That's not a great experience. And then if you have the cord cutting that's going on, it's definitely not trending in the right direction. We recently signed a deal, or actually didn't sign a deal. We actually decided to go pretty much independent where we would produce our own games. We worked out a deal with our local provider that's over air. So if you have bunny ears and you can turn on a TV, it is available to you. We have the ability every night to reach 3.2 million people. Everyone in the state can watch the game for the first time in, maybe 15 years. Not only that, we signed, we're announcing a streaming option, where as cheap as $5 a game, you can come out and watch every game, or you can buy a season pass, and that comes with 2 tickets. So almost 2 tickets, and you kind of get that season pass. Then we're signing a deal to go north into our region, which is Idaho and Wyoming and part of Washington. And so in this move, we've gone from 1.2 million people to almost 5 million people being able to watch this. And we created SEG Media, which is a media network, to be able to televise and broadcast and add content. We're actually a media business, and we're leaning into that. And this is the first year. It's about ready to start in 6 weeks.
Do you think that's a better model then than centralizing it, packaging it as one, and negotiating as a block?
Well, so there's the national deal, which, is the ESPN and TNT and all of that, which will obviously continue, but every team has their own local. I believe that controlling your own destiny and not having to worry about new modes and being able to attack every new thing that's going to come up is well worth maybe even the financial hit of taking a step back, but providing a better experience for the fans. I think when you focus on experience for the fans, it wins every time long term. And I don't know what the next 2 or 3 major breakthroughs for media consumption is with sports. But what I do know is we're not going to have any conflict in jumping on every single one of those.
Can I ask, Ryan, how do you think about short form? When you look at TikTok analytics today, sport is the most consumed content on TikTok. Above 20 VC, it pains me to say. But, shocking. But how do you think about short form, whether it's Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, on that other end of the spectrum? You're kind of democratizing access kind of for maybe an older audience when we think about kind of more traditional TV there. When we think about short form video, Reels, Shorts, TikTok, how do we think about that as a brand?
Yeah, so we're launching something called Jazz Plus. And part of that, like part of SEG Media, is not just our physical distribution of long form games. Part of that is like, okay, we've got, I don't know, 2 million people on TikTok. We've got 1.3 million on Instagram. Like, what are we going to be doing to actually take Jazz Plus to each of those different groups? And I think the mistake people make is they think about a fan and they think that they're all the same. And actually the old model was that we have one fan. Actually, we don't. We don't have one fan. We actually have maybe 6 different profiles or 7 different profiles of fans on how they consume media from a media perspective, right? You might have my parents or some people who just want to sit in a lazy boy and watch the game over air. You might have people who are on the move that everything is on the phone. You might have people who just want to check in and they want to watch the highlights. You might have folks who are like, they'll tune in against the big games. You might have people who just want to bet. You might have people who are just like looking at certain players and the ability to drill down because they love Jordan Clarkson. Like, I don't know what it is, but from an experience standpoint, I mean, we just went through this with Delta Airlines and doing their free Wi-Fi. They almost went through the exact same thing. They were sitting in a model where they made a lot of money off of GoGo or whoever they were using for Wi-Fi. They just announced that there's free Wi-Fi on all their planes. And so I was working with their CEO, Ed Bastian and Delta, on the Qualtrics side, to come through and say, hey, like, how are we going to hit each segment, from their diamond medallions to the first-time flyers? There's all these different folks with business travelers or family travelers. And how does every group benefit from this new thing? And how do we make it so it's easy for everyone? And it's almost the exact same type of challenge here, where it's saying, hey, we've got all these different groups of people coming to one single purpose, but how do we get a personalized experience for every one of them? And that's what it's really about. That's the same thing it's about for Delta. It's the same thing it's about for Amazon. It's the same thing about for the Jazz. Is like, we want a personalized experience. And I would argue even those listening to your pod, some people want the video version. Some people want to hear it. Some people, like myself, I listen to pods when I'm exercising. Like, it's what I do. And if I'm not exercising, I'm not listening.
Can I ask, you mentioned star players there and kind of people's interest in them. We obviously saw Messi have a very differently structured deal when he moved to Miami and kind of really take part of the streaming, revenues. Do we think that we'll see that continue in terms of champion players take more and more of a portion of streaming revenues and kind of business contracts, given their increasing transition from players to companies?
Look, I mean, I think Messi's been kind of a pioneer in a lot of different categories. I mean, this wasn't just someone coming over. It was arguably like the number 1 or number 2 best player in the World Cup 6 months prior. I think for what Apple was looking for when they were trying to, I mean, you got to look at it from Apple's standpoint. Apple's coming in and saying, hey, look, we want to go into live sports in a big way. And the MLS deal for Apple is big. It's unknown, though. It's a very different model, rather than saying, hey, look, we're going to go pay gazillion dollars up front and then we're going to take it and you guys don't worry about it, which is the old model that I had talked about. Eddie and the team over at Apple came in and said, hey, look, actually, let's join a partnership. Most of these television models, by the time they get to the end, one side's either really up or really down. In tech, a lot of our partnerships, we kind of iterate together and we're both incentivized to go together. And I see the MLS partnership with Apple very much like a tech partnership where, hey, we're all putting enough in to start. What are the 20 moves that we're each going to make that might not be what you would think a typical media contract would be that help lift us all? And if you think about it that way, all of a sudden here pops in Messi. What should that move be?
Get him promoting it. Getting him posting it on all of his channels.
What was Apple going to get for international signups on MLS? How many? Not that much.
No.
With Messi, what do they get? So tell me this, would you rather have 75% or 60% of all of international or 100% of none of it?
This is a really interesting one, though, because you talk about, like, you know, that as a league structure, that's a load of teams coming together. You as Real Salt Lake negotiating as well to bring, you understand the collective value, but it's benefiting one team massively. Like, you just wouldn't have that anywhere else in other sports, because the competition can actually lead to you dropping out of a league and going out of business if you do that really badly. Whether with the structures that you have, you're collectively incentivized to strike this kind of deal because it's mutually beneficial, which is really interesting.
It's an interesting dynamic, and this is where the closed market conversation comes in, because like in the NBA, we want to kill each other on the court. Like when I face Ballmer or Lacob or Pags, like we want to destroy each other. However, when we get in the room, like we're all partners, and we're partners with the players, and we should be. Like, I think the NBA just came and actually did a really good job with a collective bargaining agreement without a work stoppage, without a threatening, where Adam and the Players Association and the NBA were able to come together and actually get a deal done in time to catch the wave that we're on. And I think that was really smart. And so I think that there has to be a level of partnership, even though you all want to win and destroy each other on the field or the pitch or the court. If the media goes well, then the players' contracts could go up.
If the product makes more money and people watch it, then the value of the product increases.
And by the way, if everyone's fighting, at the end of the day, the fan experience isn't good and everyone's going to take a hit. So you kind of got to be smart in how you collaborate.
I feel like the grandpa on this, because I feel like the cynic, because I'm like, am I the only one thinking, with the rise of people becoming companies and this unbelievable focus on Messi is Miami now, like it or not? Sorry, I know there's Busquets. I know that's a bold statement. I'm going to get killed for it, but fuck it. He is Miami, and he's old. In 2 years, he's going to be retiring. What is Miami after Messi is my question. I don't know.
What is Chicago after Jordan?
What's Man U after Cristiano Ronaldo?
What's Tottenham after Kane?
Not very much. Unfortunately, they're really good. I was just going to say, part of the deal was, like, he supposedly got shares. He's got equity in Inter Miami, right? So there's going to be an involvement for him for a while. He's also supposedly got the opportunity, what they did with Beckham, to own a franchise when the time presents itself and he wants to move forward.
It doesn't matter, bro. What matters is he gets his boots on and he starts doing some wonderful things on the court, on the pitch.
But Harry, like, you're right. You're not wrong.
I agree. Cheers, Ryan.
But if you're sitting in that spot, what would you do? You do the Messi deal.
I would.
With everything that you said, you do the Messi deal.
Absolutely, I'd do the Messi deal.
Like, I don't think there's anyone sitting at the table that couldn't put the cynic hat on and go, well, but when you're incentivized the same way, you do the Messi deal.
There's a genuine question then of, like, what do they need to do to create that sustained passion and retention that will expand beyond Messi? How do you bring someone in for a hero Qualtrics product and bring them into the product suite? Like,
it's going to be the next two deals, but at least you got the first one under your belt. Mm-hmm. At least you can learn from it. The worst scenario is if you don't do that deal. I mean, if they did 6 deals and 4 of them were great and 2 of them were bad, okay.
Ryan, if we were to go like, pow, whiteboard, we're going to do this with Utah Jazz, what would the deal be for Utah Jazz that would be like, pow, for Miami?
I haven't seen it yet. You'll read about it.
You have seen it.
There's been a couple. I mean, the first one was Danny Ainge. I don't know. It hasn't presented itself in the same way. But I think that when you're in these moments, you want to at least have the ability to be able to have currency. Yeah. And in the NBA, there's 2 types of currency. Number one is you need salary cap room to be able to flex up to do something. And you also need assets. So when we took over the Jazz, the team was awesome. Like, I actually loved that Jazz team. I was a fan coming in going, holy cow, like, we're the number one team. But we were maxed out on cap, and we had no more draft picks unless we were really going into the negative. So I remember sitting with Danny in the first draft, and he's like, we have no draft picks this draft. So we're sitting in the draft room, and he's like, you guys, this isn't fun. It's not fun to sit here in the draft room with no draft picks.
You ever been on my Hinge profile, mate?
Right now, we're in a spot where we have cap going forward, and we have a load of picks, which allow the optionality where that whiteboard pow moment comes along, we can actually go do it. That's what's exciting. And you got to get super lucky. I mean, you know, it looks simple, but I don't think that everyone knew that Messi would come out the way he's come out. You don't know like what happens and how that goes. We were one game at RSL. We were half away against Houston from hosting Messi for the cup here in Salt Lake. And you had everyone glued because it was tied at half going, all right, and we ended up losing in the second half. But I was like, holy cow, the momentum. We were like, hey, we're going to need to go to a bigger stadium. Like, that's the excitement that's coming around, the chance to do that. And, you know, we've had Garrett Bell, we've had a bunch of people that have come through, but nothing's like that. And that's, you know,
well,
that's exciting.
He's global, right? And you're talking about someone that is in so many places, like a god. He's a god of football. He's a god of sport. He does one thing he does is he brings audience and he brings eyeballs. You know you're going to get that. And what you're hoping for is he brings performance to accompany it. And if you can do that, which he's done when he's gone into the league, then you're getting what you need.
Yeah, in basketball, what we've done is I was just in Croatia and I was in Zadar, where you've got like this town where basketball is everything. And that is the sport. And you're watching folks from Croatia and from Serbia and from Spain, and everyone comes over to the US because that's the best basketball on the planet. The NBA is it. The NBA has done a great job internationally. If you look at NBA Africa, where everyone's coming over. Historically in the US, if we had good talent, it would go the other way. And I think what you're seeing is this movement. I've seen it the last 2 years in MLS that talent is starting to come this way, or at least be open to it. Even at the open window for MLS, like, we had a list of players that we were looking at, and 4 of the 5 were playing on Premier League teams.
Yeah.
And they were open to coming over to Real Salt Lake if it lined up. And these are people you would all know. Like, that's great. What I love about the Messi is there's a bunch of kids in the US who were able to watch him. And there's a bunch of kids who are going, that's what I want to be like. And I think that they need that, because when Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan were there and we were growing up, we were like, that's what it looks like. That's him. And everyone's able to see, like, that's him.
But that's the longer term value that Harry, you know, if we're talking about it, that's what you get from him. But it's the first point as well, where you bring one in and all the attention comes onto it. That attracts 100 more, and 100 more. Maybe there are not many Messis, virtually none. But if you get 100 more, you know, European top level Premier League quality players coming out to the MLS, suddenly you get everyone wanting to come and play there, because it builds.
If you don't think the Premier League players are sitting there watching what's going on, you're out of your mind.
We've obviously talked about Messi, but can you tell us about what happened when you got the opportunity to buy Real Salt Lake, and why you kind of decided to add that relatively quickly after your acquisition of the Jazz to what's now a pretty good sports portfolio?
It's interesting because I looked at Real Salt Lake first, and then I went to the family that owned the Jazz and said, hey, look, I know you don't want to sell the Jazz, but if I bought the soccer team and then we put them together, could I just have a little piece of the Jazz? Like, I know you're never going to sell it, but it's been in the family for 35 years, but like, maybe this is a way. At first the answer was no. And then I went back again and it was like, well, if we're going to sell a little bit of the Jazz, we're going to sell the whole thing. And I was like, did I hear that right? Well, what would that look like? And they're like, well, if you made an offer, we'd have to take it to the board. And I literally pulled out my phone and looked at the Forbes valuation and like said, does that work? And they're like, yeah, that's an offer. I was like, nothing more than that? No. And took it to the board and called back and said, we're good. Then I was like, well, I guess we're not doing soccer. Like, we're going to NBA. And then a year later, my friend David Blitzer, who owns Crystal Palace and a bunch of other teams, called. And he's like, dude, what's going on with the RSL? And I was like, I got my hands full over here with the NBA. And I got to be honest, man, I'm a hoops guy. I actually love the intrigue of MLS, but like, I played soccer a little bit as a kid, but I'm not like in it. The one thing I've learned is you got to like really be in it. Like if it's golf or hoops, like I know more than most people and I like live and breathe it. Like, and he's like, I kind of do a lot of this. He's like, but I'm not doing this without you. And I was like, well, I wouldn't do it without you. I was like, how about this? How about we go buy this? You have to run it because I've got my hands full on this side, and we'll go do this together. And that's actually how it happened. Look, we're in year 2 of soccer. I think we're learning a lot. I think outside of Messi, we're not showing it as well right now, but we spent probably more money than anyone on acquiring players in the open window. And we've acquired quite a few, and we have an incredible academy. Like, I'm bullish long-term on it, but I think there's a little bit of a relaunch in how we can work on the brand. And I think there's a lot of synergies with the NBA team here in Utah. I'm really passionate about sports, but I'll be honest, and I get people calling me for Premier League and everything else. I'm only interested in sports in Utah.
Really?
That's all I care about.
Can I ask you a weird one? When you buy a team, do you literally transfer, hundreds of millions of dollars? Is it like that? Is it in installments? How does it literally work?
As opposed to like Venmo or like credits on.
Are you like PayPal? Yo, bro, don't spend all at once, half a bill.
Well, there is a financial component of acquiring a team. And it's been historically based in U.S. currency. So you are correct.
We can edit out rude comments from American guests. I'm sorry. These tech founders are not what they used to be. It's these valuations.
Yeah, hey, I got stock. Hey, we'll do a deal. How about I'll give you some of my portfolio in underwater tech stock?
That'd be great. But like, do you actually pay in installments? Do you pay just like in one? I'm genuinely intrigued.
It depends on the deal. Like when we did the Jazz, we wanted the family who did it to really be involved, just to make a smooth transition. And I would argue that, Adam told me over All-Star, it's been one of the greatest transitions of how to transition a team we've ever seen, especially for a market like Utah. And, they kept 20%. Now they're down to 10, less than 10, and they'll be going out. But some, it's just like right up front. And so it's different depending. I think as the prices go up, the creativity on these deals will get different. When you're talking $4 and $5 billion for a franchise, holy cow. Like, if you look at the amount of people who can actually transact, that pool, to your question, is like, hey, can this continue to go up? The question is how are these things purchased? Because if you actually look at it, if someone's going to write a check for something that size and they've already had an exit and they paid taxes, that means their exit would have been twice that. It limits the pool to who can acquire some of these franchises. And this is why when you look at sovereign wealth funds and you look at pension funds, their ability, I would be watching that more than anything else, because if they loosen up, it used to be just an individual with cash could buy. Yeah. The debt covenants on how much debt you can put on these teams it's not that much. If the Commanders went for $6 billion, like someone had to come up with $5 billion in cash. Like, that's a lot. And so you're seeing these groups of people go in. What I would really watch is these leagues allowing different funds and wealth funds to be able to come in, because that completely changes the game to buying the teams.
Is that the future of sports ownership, do you think? Financial institutions?
I don't know where it starts and ends. I know that financial institutions are able to come in. I don't know whether sovereign wealth is going to be something that comes in with that. I don't know what the rules are around that. I don't know. Most of these have historically been minority. So you have an individual that's coming in or a group of individuals that come in, and then behind that is, let's say 30% or 20% from one of these funds. And if you're an individual coming in, like, you would rather have probably a fund come in with you, because probably a lot you have to deal with to manage. And it's patient money. Similarly to taking an investment in tech, taking individual money might be a little more emotional at times than taking from a fund who's making a broader portfolio play and is able to ride the up and down a little better. And I think that's where the appeal comes in. And, I've been on both sides of that from, we raised about 400 million in venture capital along the way.
If you're looking at value of NFL, NBA, and then you're looking at the stage MLS is at, but also the likely growth it's about to go through, now surely a really good time to go and buy one of those teams, because that franchise value is likely to go up. You're going to have a secured amount of teams that if you look at how, as I said, the growth of NBA and NFL has worked, have increased in value.
Yeah, your brother doesn't seem to think that it's going to go up that much.
I think these are terrible businesses. Have you seen Man U's market cap? It's 3 billion on 500 million of revenue. This is Man U, one of the most prominent brands alongside Coca-Cola in the world. And that's where we're at.
What do you think about Man City?
Not a buyer either.
Chelsea?
I'm not a buyer. Fuck no, I'm not a buyer there. Jesus. No, I was like,
and that's our team, by the way. That is our team.
What about, that's your team? Yeah. You guys are Chelsea fans?
Yeah, these are not good businesses, guys.
They're not good businesses.
Okay, what about Chelsea with a new arena renovation and a hotel and everything around it?
You think that's a good business, bro?
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
You layer on a hotel, and now it's a good business.
No, but it was a good business anyway. It's not a good business in the terms of how much revenue it generates. We know that. Like, if you're actually looking at them, they're relatively small businesses, but the value they have, the brand they have, the land that Chelsea sits on alone is some of the most expensive real estate in London. And it owns a huge amount of that.
I think the really important point there is more like, when we said about Man U and being like Coca-Cola in terms of brand, there is a huge chasm between the revenues of Man U and Coca-Cola, but the brand, they're in the same league. And so actually, is there this massive arb opportunity where actually these are massively undervalued brands? And I'm totally wrong on the flip side.
I've seen a couple of the Premier League kind of deals come across. Harry, this is actually what it's been about, is does the team coming in have the ability to unlock the brand?
Yeah.
I mean, the Jazz are the biggest brand in the state, period, hard stop.
Yeah.
How do we unlock and bring that brand to do something? Because I think you're probably more right. Like, if you're going to make one of these purchases, you better have a day job, right? Because they're big and they're a lot, but someone's got to pay the bills, or you've got to be in a really good financial spot. You're not coming into this as though you're coming into your first entrepreneurial gig. It is a second gig for go through every single person. Like, go through Todd at Chelsea. This isn't his primary business. You go through Blitz, it's not his primary business. Go through Pags, it's not his primary business. Like, these folks, it's not the number one thing they have done. It's what they're doing now with the hope to unlock that brand to go create something. And in the craziest part of it, no one's really lost yet.
Yeah.
And like, if you actually take a step back and think about it, like, because I believe Chelsea will be something that more and more little Stebbings come up thinking that's their team, whether you like it or not. Like, it's happening. And
my kids are Qualtrics fans. They're like, go.
What if we put Qualtrics? What if we put Qualtrics on the Chelsea jersey? Right? Like,
we need a sponsor.
Yeah.
We need a sponsor.
Except for Egon, who now owns Qualtrics, is I think pretty locked into the ownership group of Man City. So you'll see that happen before.
You got to look at it. You think, actually, like, the rights in the Premier League is behind, right? It's still 5 billion, but they're not maximizing it. They don't monetize their fans well enough. They definitely don't use a lot of technology in the stadiums. Well, the stadiums are out of date. The distribution models of a lot of what they do and actually owning, like you were talking about, owning some of their own kind of content and creative ideas and doing stuff outside of the main thing that's distributed through the Premier League is rubbish as well. These guys are looking at it and they're going, yeah, it's a lot of money, it's opportunity as well. Like that opportunity is there. Can they make the money?
To look at it. You have to look at it that way. From real estate, I mean, the Premier League teams that have inquired with me have been more like, hey, Rye, how do we get a tech ecosystem going around where we're geographically positioned in the UK?
And they've asked you that.
Like, we want your help.
They've asked you that.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. Like we think there is a massive tech component around everything that we're doing. Will you help us? And that would be what we would want your value add to come in on the investment side. And
what do you say to them? Help me understand. Like, what is the technology savior that they're looking to embrace with that question?
If you're going to look at a geography, right, and you have the ability to attract tech in that area, like we've seen it in Utah, like we created Silicon Slopes, right, where the jobs have grown, the companies have grown, and let's say these teams, I mean, I would say that, I don't know, I saw a stat that out of the groups that hold these teams, most of them have a fund component to running a tech fund. I mean, we're standing one up with SEG. So SEG is Smith Entertainment Group. It's what owns the Jazz, the arena. We're standing up SEG Ventures, right? Which is a venture fund component because there's enough folks around and there's enough value we can add and help in the intersection of the NBA and sport and tech are incredibly valuable. I've seen it with Qualtrics. Like, I mean, I think Qualtrics are working with most of the teams. It's a liaison you can host at these places where marketing's harder and harder and harder for these tech companies. The ability to actually market and position and be a part of it. You're seeing with F1, half of the fins of the cars are a tech company, whether you see CrowdStrike and everything on there. Like, being able to go in, and all of these companies will say, like, that's one of the coolest things we've done in our history is be part of a team. I think that people want to learn how to activate that brand in that way. And I believe the best organizations going forward are those who can activate the brand, not only on the digital side as we're talking about, but the tech side, the real estate side, and that's the broader play. And then obviously you need to win out on the pitch or the field or the court.
Yeah, F1 partnerships are so good. I see it on the wheel and I'm like, CrowdStrike fucking nailed it. I mean, that is such a good...
No, and I've talked to George a bunch about it when he was like, dude, we're going into F1. This is what we're going to go do. We actually run our tech. He is like, so he's racing himself. Like, it's
George is like a massive racer though. He's doing it out of love.
yeah. But like, he is so excited about F1 and it goes week to week and like, you can actually do that. And actually one of the things the PGA Tour's got to figure out is like how to almost F1 their model. So every one of their events, like CrowdStrike is there along every single event instead of it being hyper local where I'm just in Monaco or I'm just in Vegas. The NBA, like we're working with our sponsors and our partners and our tech portfolio to say, hey, you should have a position in every single city that the Jazz play in. And like work on something like that. And that's where the brands really come in where, you know, when we roll into town as the Jazz, like we're bringing the sponsors and the fans with us no matter where we are.
You look at like that's probably it's what something in the Premier League doesn't do well enough right now as well. You look at why Chelsea are struggling to sell a 40 million deal. It's not necessarily because the value's not there. It's because they probably aren't packaging it right. They're not including the right assets in there. They're not necessarily saying what all the brands could actually be doing with them. They're probably not taking them on a journey that allows them to meet a lot of their goals because they're saying, oh, look, we've got a nice advertising board. We've got a really sexy shirt that you can go and stick your logo on. But my experience with a lot of these people, they don't understand a lot of opportunity because a lot of the people structured within that organization are either legacy people within sport who have always worked a very particular way, or they're people that don't actually understand the businesses of sport and haven't necessarily then also understood how to maximize all of this opportunity.
40 million is a big number, first of all. Like, I mean, we're about ready to kick off our 50th season with the Delta Center, and we brought the Delta Center back to be the title sponsor of the arena, right? And in the Last Dance, in the early days, it was the Delta Center, and then it went through like 3 different groups, and we had a chance to bring that Delta Center name back. And that's a big deal. That's a big financial commitment from Delta Airlines. It's a great validation for the city, for the state. They just put $3 billion into the airport. They don't need market share. Reality is those deals are done a little differently. Like that deal is often done. I mean, it started with a conversation with myself and the CEO, Ed Bastian, him saying, Ryan, I don't need market share, but this is what it means. And so it takes a little bit more creativity from the teams to say, hey, look, those are really hands-on. There's only a couple of them you have as a franchise. And these are not ones that you send one person to the organization to go talk to one person there. It's kind of a little bit of an all-in moment where you're saying, hey, if we're crafting that brand and the shirt or the arena is the pinnacle, it is the hero, it is the one like flagship sponsor that we have that sets the tone for everything else, what does that look like? And if you look at Delta Airlines, you know who their partners are. You know who their sponsors are. You know that they're a Coca-Cola, right? You know they're American Express. So when you go to Man U or you go to Chelsea or you go to the Utah Jazz, you know that our partner is Delta. And you know that our partner, and you need to make that known so they're synonymous with those brands, that not only what does a brand stand for, but what other types of brands are affiliating with that brand. Those are all hands on deck moments from ownership all the way down. And that's how these deals get structured. So I don't know what it is like to sell a $40 million jersey or kit sponsor. But what I do know is the way that happens is all hands on deck and principals all together, and actually not getting just any $40 million sponsor, but actually that is going to be the pinnacle of your brand.
But I think that's the interesting point. Like, you should probably go and sell that for them, because that's exactly what I don't think they're doing. Like they're selling. They're selling.
I don't think he needs the commission, Charlie. You know,
no, but I mean, you can help us out a bit, because I think the way we're spending money, we probably need to bring some in.
Listen, Ryan, being aware of your time, I've loved this. Can we do a quick fire round? Because I'm aware that we could talk all day.
Did we not have enough fire in this round?
This is like the short questions. I think I brought the fire, and I'm going to get more hate than ever for doing the Business of Sport podcast and not believing it's good business. But
no, you believe it's good business, but you're asking all the right questions, man. I think you should be asking all these questions. I think when you're doing a deal like Meze, and by the way, it's not like we don't ask these questions either.
Yeah.
Because if I went back through like where everyone came from, they came from different parts of business, and they're all comparing, and that's what you're doing. Or you're saying, hey, wait, I do the VC podcast, and I know those businesses in and out. I'm reading through S1s going, how the hell do I understand this? And then I'm coming over to this world. Well, I think the exact same way you do.
I'm also thinking about the opportunity cost of capital, being like, yes, this is an asset unlike any other. Sorry, I can invest in this, or I can invest in you name your other asset. And so it's just a case of bluntly like upside optimization in my mind when I think about investing.
You're buying brands.
Yeah.
There's never been a brand, and a lot of time in tech, especially in enterprise, brand is not a thing.
Like Salesforce is brand. I think brands are more important than ever in enterprise now.
But how many are there?
I would say quite a few. The more verticalized you get, the more important you get. Like, it could be, hairdressing booking appointments. The brand, like Lightspeed, the POS system for restaurants, has actually a really strong
That's a blast
brand.
from the past.
Well, I mean, it's still... Not all of us are, young millennials, Brian. Okay?
I remember sitting in Excel's office when they invested in Lightspeed and going, oh, okay, that's what it looks like. But no, and I'm not saying the brands aren't important, because they are more important in enterprise tech. I just don't think it's prioritized the same way it is in consumer.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with sports, like if you're not in the brand business, then what are you doing? Because actually, in our case, we don't have Salt Lake City on the jersey. We have Utah. We are branding a state. That's what's exciting to me. Is when I go to Croatia and they're like, I'm from Utah, they're saying, oh, the Jazz. They all say that. That's what they see. And so I think that's a huge opportunity to do something great.
I totally agree with you. That's very cool. Right, let's do a quick fire. So what one sports asset do you not have that you'd love to own?
I think either hockey or baseball.
Which one?
I think we need another team here in Utah.
You create one.
I don't care how it gets here.
You said you asked the same questions that Harry was asking. What convinced you that this was the good deal then?
I believe in the state. I believe in Utah. I believe in where we're going. You know, our state's been in hypergrowth. We're the number one fastest growing state. We're the youngest state. We got the number one economy in the U.S. And it's been that way for, 7 or 8 out of the last 10 years. And fundamentally, that puts you in a different spot. This team and this organization has always been known as a small market team. Typically there's a judgment, a feeling, a way that people view small markets. However, there's nothing small market about Utah. Like nothing. We have 7 million people that come in here to ski. Everyone comes in town. Our tech scene is number 2 or 3 in the U.S. with the tech, rise. You can jump on a plane 5 minutes, 10 minutes from our arena and go straight to Amsterdam, London, France. Like that's not a small market. Plus the hypergrowth. It was a small market probably 15 to 20 years ago, but we led the league in new $1 million brand sponsorships last year. There's nothing small market about Utah. The difference is we historically haven't been known for our urban living because people come here to live in the mountains and spread out. And our pitch really is that wellness is a premium. And I think we were just voted the happiest state in the U.S. And we're that way for a reason. And I think happiness is a premium. And so we're selling happiness.
So what really convinced you wasn't the fact it was a good business. It was the fact that it was an important asset of the state that represented the life that you love.
Yeah. Like if we never made a dime and we've never taken any money out of this, like I'm totally cool with it.
See what I love, Ryan, Charlie? We're selling happiness. Like, what a great guess. Like, what a fucking hero.
I want to use that. I want to use that for the intro.
I'm going to use that for my date.
Oh, geez. That's going to get taken out of context. That's going to get taken out of context. So please don't use that. That can be a sub. That can be a sub one. But look at it. We were just show the clip. I'll send you the article. It just came out. It said Utah voted the happiest state.
Mm-hmm. I want to have business of sport. We sell happiness.
Yeah. Jazz is halftime entertainment. If you could call yourself up the night before you bought the Jazz and just say, Ryan, you should know this. What would be the next few sentences post, Ryan, you should know this?
I don't know. I don't think I've figured it out yet, honestly. Nothing surprised me. I think it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Did you expect it to be the work that it is?
No, I think, I mean, I expect everything to be work. I almost make it work, but it's tough to balance everything. And there's a lot of emotion, but it's also super fun. Like, and I've had to tell myself, like, if I were to go back and say, hey, to remind myself of one thing, it's like, dude, you're a fan first. Smile, enjoy it. Like, you get to go run your childhood NBA team. Don't ever lose that. Don't ever lose that energy. Don't ever lose that fun. Don't ever lose looking up in the crowd and trying to say, hey, you were a kid there. If you were in your shoes, what would you do to that kid? Would you bring him down on the court? Would you offer an experience? How do you get everyone to experience what you're experiencing coming through that? And I try to remember that always. Like, if I was a kid and I was coming to my first game and I met the person in my role, what would you do to make it special and unforgettable? And like, that's what I want to remember.
Have you felt compromised at all in the time that you've owned it by being a fan and being an owner?
I think every sports owner or governor feels super compromised because there's a short and a long-term tension that is the equivalent of like making this quarter or preparing for the long term, right? Like it's similar in tech, like, and it's not compromise. It's probably more of you're managing polar opposite emotions. You know, you've got a coach who's trying to win every game. You've got a front office who's trying to build for the future. That's a hard thing. And so you've got to rationalize those two thoughts. And so, look, I'm competitive. I want to win yesterday. We have all the assets, like, let's go spend, like, but there's a patience part of this that is really important. And I'll just be honest, in tech, we're not known for our patience.
In venture, we are. Trust me, I've been waiting years for fucking carry checks.
Especially right now.
I've totally freewheeled this show. Poor Charlie. You see what he has to put up with.
Hey, it's fine.
Bro, I haven't looked once at a schedule, so I've loved it.
Great, game on. Tell me, Ryan, you can have one person at a dinner party, anyone, dead or alive. Who do you have and why them? So like mine's Bernard Arnault from LVMH. I think he's probably one of the most incredible figures in the last 100 years.
I don't know. I'd probably have my grandpa back right now, right? Because he introduced me to the Jazz, and like I remember watching games with him, and he was like a business guy who stood up for a lot, did everything the right way. And I think that if I could have him back right now to just like go to a game with him, that'd be pretty special.
It's a brilliant answer. It's much better than Bernard Arnault.
I was going to say, Harry, wouldn't a nice family member you want to bring to dinner?
Not really.
Shame.
You'll go.
No, just final one for me. What keeps you up at night? What worries you?
God, a lot. I mean, I sleep pretty good. I always have, like even in the tech things, I think that's really important. Like, you know, people that can fall asleep at any time. Like I'm one of those people. But what worries me is like, we're trying to do a lot. Like, you know, I think Ash and we've got 5 kids, and we're trying to raise them the right way. And, you know, they're growing up in a different world than the way we do. I think that trying to decide how to spread our time and use our resources to help benefit the most, trying to still grow personally and grow better, try to learn. You know, I've got a lot of roles, whether it's family or friend or parent or brother, or life's pretty good, man. Like I'm probably more grateful than ever. And I've always tried to be somewhat grateful for everything that comes, good and bad. And so I think that's been key. And just trying not to take ourselves too seriously. Like at the end of the day, like this is all kind of a game. We can't lose sight of the relationships that we have and the people in our lives, and that's like most important. Is like, hey, are you being a good human on that front?
You know, Ryan, I so respect you as a founder, as an operator, as a father, as a husband, and you know what? After this, I'm buying the happiness you're selling. Yeah, I'm here for it.
Me too.
I think I'm going to come on and help you interview your next guest. I don't know who it is, not Benioff, but like someone else. Like, dude, we should make this. We should make this a regular show on the world of sports.
Yeah, can we do it with sports?
I'd get fined really quickly, and I'd get in trouble because we just free flow everything.
You can afford it. I can't.
I'm going to say, if we get fined, if you could pick it up, that's fine. Then you come on whenever you want.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to get fined for anything. Like you guys are there. I'm the one that's got to keep the mouth shut on certain topics, but
dude,
we should do something. This is fun, guys.
No,
I didn't even know.
You've been amazing. Thank you so much, dude. It's fantastic.